as being an author of a book. I used to be an engineer. I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm really a professional speaker by trade. That's how I earn a living. And people kept asking me if they could buy my book. And I didn't have a book, but I needed money. So I put two and two together, and I decided I better get a book if people want to buy it. So I was just telling Mitchell Kaplan, the genius behind Books and Books, he was startled by my story. Actually, he had no idea that I self-published my book way back in 2003, and people didn't self-publish back then. There was one famous book that was self-published back then, The Celestine Prophecies, that really made it into the big leagues. Today, you've heard of 50 Shades of Grey. That was self-published. The Martian, anybody see the movie? Matt Damon. That is a self-published. He put it up there as a periodical originally. It's amazing what you can do in self-publishing. Anybody can write a book. Anybody can be successful with distribution, etc. Back in 2003, those were the caveman days, and I self-published it. Ultimately, I was discovered. There was a bidding war, and a very good friend of Mitch Kaplan's, it turns out, of Mitch Kaplan's, was with Hyperion. He was the executive vice president, and he bought The Fine Art of Small Talk, and you'll see it in this version now. So when it was in its original version, it was paperback, it was purple and red, because somebody advised me that purple's a good color to get people to buy it off the shelves, etc. There were a lot of, in those days we had Barnes & Noble and Borders and Books A Million, etc. And the reason this book looks like this, they not only bought this book, but they paid for me to write another book, The Fine Art of the Big Talk, which we don't have here tonight. I wonder if anybody can guess what this book cover resembles, what Hyperion was doing when they created. Pardon me? Nope, close. Malcolm Gladwell. Hyperion, which is now owned by Hachette, they bought them out, so this is now a Hachette published book. But nonetheless, they tried to make it look like Malcolm Gladwell's books, and that was really helpful, and I thank them very much for that, because people's eyes will go to them in airport bookstores, et cetera, et cetera. So this book, The Fine Art of Small Talk, has been published traditionally since 2005, and we're standing in 2016, and it is still makes the bestseller list. So it just was a wonderful gift in my life that came to be. The Fine Art of the Big Talk is another book, and then just out last year, Beyond Texting, The Fine Art of Face-to-Face Communication for Teenagers. So I'd really like to talk to you about this book for a second, and then we'll go on to some information that you might gain from especially this book. So I had a lot of success with both the books, Small Talk book and the Big Talk book. I'm a professional speaker. Writing a book, selling a book, and I'm proud to introduce you tonight to Ron and Sue Sharp right here. Give them a round of applause, because, and I hope she'll watch later, but their daughter Nancy Sharp is the author of a book called Both Sides Now, and it was published by Mitch Kaplan, and it's very successful, and it's a memoir. And Nancy, their daughter, the author, would tell you that the hardest part about being an author isn't necessarily writing the book, it's marketing the book. That's the hardest part of being an author. And these days it's worse, because they really expect the author to do the work for that. So I was done writing books. I didn't need to write any more books. Everything was great. But I had this hole in my heart that knew that teenagers might benefit from a book on communication skills. And that place in my heart came long before devices became so prevalent. In 1988, those of you who were alive then, Oprah and I that year, we both lost 65 pounds. Now, Oprah's doing this again on this Weight Watchers thing, but I tell you this about myself, I've since lost more. So I was an obese child, I was an obese woman until I was in my mid to late 30s. When you are like that in this world, you are excluded from everything. And I don't think things have changed for youngsters today. No girls invited me to their birthday parties. I did not get asked out for a date till I got out of college. So my best friends were books. Doing what, for instance, I did tonight, I tried to say hello to some people. Lynn, we talked for a while. Now I'm going to forget how to say your name. Say it for me again, please. Carol Bia. To walk up to her, to introduce myself, to engage her in conversation, to try to be welcoming, to not wait for anybody here to introduce themselves to me was completely out of my reality. I would never have done that. I think that's one of the reasons I became an engineer, was because anybody else an engineer in the room? Oh, you are. Oh, and here you are. Well, as you can see, you're not a dork just by looking at it. Look how glamorous she is. Even her blanket is glamorous, let alone her outfit. But I was a dork, and so I was very lonely, and I didn't know how to make friends, and I just thought all of you were born with this gift of gab, and wow, I wish I'd had that. So I lived that life in my heart, in my mind, until my late 30s, but I knew that there were other teenagers that must have I felt like I was suffering when I was a teenager, but now I look back, there's far worse things that can happen. But when you don't have friends, when everyone else seems to have a friend, when everyone else seems to know how to talk to a teacher, go on a job interview, I just felt like such an outsider. So I had this burning passion once my kids had been off and gone, and we were empty nesters, and I like to brag about my kids. They're all self-supporting. So I had this passion that I would write a book for teenagers, so that if there was a teenager like me, that at least there was a book. If I'd had a book where somebody told me how to walk up to someone and just start a conversation with them, or how to be a good listener so that people would like you, or just how to be likable. Like how are these people likable where people want to spend time with them? How do they do that? If someone had just given me a book to read, because I spent my days in the library, I love books. I'm an engineer. Like, just tell me how to do it, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. But there was no book for me. Dale Carnegie, but that wasn't for me. I didn't understand it. It didn't fit me. So I decided to write a book for teenagers. And obviously now there's another challenge out there besides the challenges I face, and the challenge is the use of devices. We went out to dinner tonight, and I'm a fan of devices. I think texting is great. I think Facebook is awesome. So who here does not text? Does anybody not text? Or who texts? Let's be positive. Who texts? So almost everybody in the room texts. My father texts. He's 90 years old. If he wants to get to know if I'm available to talk, I would suggest he keep texting, because or we could play phone tag for a few days. That's always fun, right? Today at dinner I was bragging that I have a daughter who's in Southeast Asia for her honeymoon. The honeymoon started on October 2nd. Today's whatever, and she's still there. Her and her husband are just going around the planet. But I posted something about books and books being here, and that it would be streamed live. And right before dinner started, I saw on my phone, on my Facebook page, that Sarah had liked it. So you know what if I wasn't coming here, do you know what that means? If I'd wanted to, she had internet service. She's on some island in Thailand. And it meant that doesn't mean she'd want to talk to me, but it meant that I could FaceTime her and try. That's a miracle. That is a wonderful, wonderful gift. My son spent the weekend in New Orleans with his girlfriend, who he met walking down the aisle at his sister's wedding on September 26th. Is that amazing? Okay, that's face-to-face communication. Now, do you think it's okay to call your 30-year-old son and say, well, how's the weekend in New Orleans going with your latest girlfriend? Do you think that's cool? No. Well, and if I did it, do you think he'd answer the phone? Do you think he'd answer the phone when his mother called, a 30-year-old man, on a weekend? No way. But two things happened this weekend that will show you how handy devices are for conversation. And then we'll move on to face-to-face. One thing that happened is that he wore, what do you call that, a man bun? So he had his really long hair, whatever. It's awful, just the most awful thing you've ever seen. So he texted me a picture. Look, Shannon's girlfriend is a stylist, and they just look at my new haircut. So I got a text from my son with a picture. Isn't that great? So I was able to reply about, because he got LASIK last week, so it's a new Jared, whatever, all that other stuff. So I don't think he would have picked up the phone at 30. Would you have? And said, Mom, guess what? I cut off my man bun. He would rather be with his girlfriend. The other thing that happened was yesterday, the Broncos, you may have heard of the Denver Broncos, were in a playoff game. So I proactively, while sitting at the airport waiting for my flight to Miami, did a group text to both of our sons and my husband, who was watching with one of my sons in Boston, watching the game. And I just said, hey, because it opened badly. So that's when I started. Opening badly, reminding me of the Super Bowl, and I group texted. And guess what? A conversation went on until my plane departed. So I was having a conversation with two sons. The son with the girlfriend was replying. because that's a safe place to have a conversation in certain situations. So I think I know how wonderful it is when I know I'm going to a party, especially for work, and I will go through Facebook and remind myself of what I know about people that I've learned recently, a job promotion, a vacation, anything meaningful in their life, because I will have things to talk about in conversation. So I'd just like to talk about a couple ideas in conversation that not only help teens, but I think help people my age. And I'm not the oldest person in the room, but I'm close. We're at the same ilk, not over here, not back there, but right here, this little triangle. So I thought we could just try something together. I'm going to throw out a question. And if you would pretend that you and I are one-on-one and respond to me with your answer as if we were just interacting in an ordinary life scene. I'm the teacher, you're my friend, you're my colleague, I'm your boss, whatever it may be. I run into you at a restaurant. So here's the question. How have you been? So, how have you been? How's your day?
Very good.
What's been going on? A lot. Well, who said that? Was that you, Abby? Oh, no, that was you, Adrian. Okay. Most people, when you say, what's been going on, and I think maybe somebody that's under 30 would help me. What do most people say? They say, what's up or what's new? What's the common expression? Right, nothing much. You know why people say nothing much? What is your name? Francis? People say not much or nothing in all generations. When people say, what's been going on, people say nothing or not much for primarily the same reason. They say nothing or not much because so much is going on, they cannot think of what it is, so they just say nothing or not much because that's easier. Just think about it. The last time you ran into a friend or just met in class and somebody said to you, how's it going? How's your day? How was class? How was break? Because some of you who are younger may be on a break today from school or work. How was work? How was that meeting? How was that event you went to last night? Most of us give one-word answers, right? Because we're on automatic pilot. And I think one-word answers are really handy when you're passing in the hall, when you have an agenda and you need to go somewhere, when you just need to move on and you don't have time to connect. But we get into this rut in conversation where we give one-word answers even when we want to connect, even when we have the time to connect. But we get too lazy. Who here hasn't gone out to dinner with their friends? And somebody will say, well, how are the kids? Good. What's going on with work? Nothing. So anything new happen? No. At least you can order a cocktail, right? And get through this lazy, boring conversation. So I'd like you to consider being prepared. I was prepared today if somebody said, if Mitchell Kaplan said to me, how was your trip? He didn't say that. I was prepared with an answer. My answer was, I'm reading an amazing epic book called Shantaram, and I can hardly put it down. That's the answer to the question, how's your trip? I've been using that. It's a 900-page book. I have been using that for a couple of weeks. I'm not bragging. I'm not giving you TMI. I'm not, if I get to talk on the phone with Adrian or Laura again, my host today, and they say, how have you been, Debra, on the phone? I will give them a real sentence in response, just a sentence. And then if they get to the business at hand, then they get to the business at hand. If they follow up on what I offered, then we're off to a conversation that has nothing to do with business. So let me give you a couple more examples. So you walk up to your teacher and you say, let's pretend you're the teacher. And I say, how was your summer? If a teacher says to me, the parent or the student, well, it was great. I just love being home with my 2 kids. She or he has given me a real answer. And now I've been given permission to talk about her or his kids. Up till then, I don't think it's cool for a student to talk about the kids. And since one of my most hated questions in small talk is, do you have any kids? What kind of question is that? What if a person says no? Where are you headed in that conversation? Are you married? No. Well, that's the end of that conversation too, right? So when you, as either an educator and or parent, imagine being a parent when your kid says to you, how was your trip, Mom? My automatic reflex with my kids, who are 28 to 34, is to say, great. How have you been? because, I want to know how my kids are been. If I don't use self-disclosure, if I don't give them a sentence about my life, how are my kids going to connect with me? And even if they don't show any interest in what I disclosed, if Mitch Kaplan had said, "How was your trip?" and I said, I'm reading this book, Shantarama, and I can hardly put it down. If he didn't show any interest at all in that, if he just said, "Well, great to have you here," or "Tell me about your books," I've planted a seed. You know what seed I've planted? I read books. Do you know who else reads books? Human beings read books. So if you're having a conversation with a teacher, or you're talking about work, or you're talking about any kind of job interview, if you can somehow remind people that you're a human being, then all of a sudden you have something in common, even if they don't read. So if somebody says, "How have you been?" and I go, "Well, I'm really looking forward to going to a trip to some warm weather because I like to cycle, and we can't cycle much in Colorado." Now you know something about me. I haven't gone on and on about how many Ks I can ride, about how I stay fit, how I do this or how I do that. So I want you to think about the next time your friends say to you, "How have you been?" and you say, "Pretty good, how about you?" How you're helping connect, how you're helping people get closer to you without giving too much. Let me give you one more example, and then I'd like to try something. Let's just say, Lynn, you seem awfully friendly. So let's say we're leaving tonight, and we both walk out together, and I say, "Whoa." No, let's say you say, no, I'll say, "Oh, boy, it's a cold night out here. It's a cold night out here." And if you're in a hurry, right, you'll say, "Debra, it sure is," and you'll go to your car, right? But if I want to talk to you and connect, just in case you want to connect with me, and you say, "Boy, it's a cold night out here, Debra, isn't it?" I would probably say to you, "I got to tell you, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, I did, and this pales in comparison to cold." So now what you've learned is that I'm from Buffalo. I didn't go on and on about it. I didn't brag about my kids' GPAs. I didn't mention my aches and pains, nothing. I just told you I was from Buffalo. If you're not in a hurry to go, you'll then say, "Well, Debra, what's it like in Buffalo? Is it as bad as they say it is? What do they do in the winter there?" Or, "Debra, what's it like having a Super Bowl loser year after year after year?" Because everyone thinks small talk is so trivial and what a waste of saliva, and why would I want to learn how to do that? Whereas I think small talk is the appetizer for any relationship. So two areas in the umbrella of small talk that I've covered in this new book is, number one, political discourse. How to have a conversation with someone who might have opposing views, who's not abusive and not offensive, and yet have an exchange. And during these times, it's become increasingly more difficult, I think. And the other chapter that's really new and different is a chapter focused on interacting with people when they are suffering, whether it's a loss of a job, a loss of a person in their family, someone that's ill. What do you say? So let's start there. I want to share an anecdote with you that is fresh. It happened yesterday. My husband, Steve, is a volunteer at Children's Hospital. He does magic tricks for children and their families that are in the lobby of the hospital. Before COVID, they used to go into the children's rooms and do this, and they're on the cusp of possibly doing that again, but that hasn't happened. So he goes into the lobby, and he wears a Dr. Seuss hat. He has his whole wagon of tricks, and he's not that skilled a magician, by the way. So if you're looking to volunteer, it's really for, up to 10 or 11-year-old. So you can fool kids. He can fool me sometimes. He walks up to this boy yesterday, and he says to the boy, "How old are you?" And he says 9. And then Steve did what he's required to do by Children's Hospital. And that is to say, "Are your parents here?" Because you can't have an adult person walking up to a boy and just engaging them in a magic trick. You need permission from their parents. So he says to this boy yesterday, "Are your parents here?" And his parent is this young boy says, "Well, my mom is, but my dad died. He's in heaven." And so Steve did something wonderful yesterday. And I don't want to take credit for it, but when I wrote this chapter in the book, I said, Steve, I've learned so much researching this and learning what to do with people that are suffering or have challenges in their lives. And Steve did exactly what is in this book. And he said to this 9-year-old, tell me about your dad. Tell me about your dad. And so the boy started talking about his dad. My dad was really tall. My dad was really strong. And then Steve wrapped that up and did magic tricks. That's one of the keys to interacting with people, is to say to them, tell me a favorite memory. If I was with Leslie alone today having coffee, or even at a get together, and said, gosh, today's your mom's birthday. Tell me a favorite memory. Tell me something that she's passed down that you implement in your everyday life, whether it be a recipe. I don't think you love to cook, Leslie, but whether it be a family tradition, what is it? And to not talk about people that are no longer with us. It's also okay to say to somebody, I understand you're in transition or things have been tough. Catch me up on what's going on. And if they don't want to talk about it, that gives them permission to not talk about it. They'll say, I'd love to catch you up another time. This just isn't an appropriate place for me, or I don't feel comfortable right now. So that's just one tip about interacting with people who are struggling. A tip about political conversation. My favorite way to interact with somebody who I believe comes from an opposing viewpoint, but who I want to invest time in and to learn more, is to say to them, help me understand. So if you and I have opposing views about whether it be choice, whether it be the Denver mayoral race, and I know not everyone on today is either in Colorado, or you're all around the globe, but we have a big race coming up. And so far we only have 17 candidates. So there's a lot to talk about. If I don't agree with you because I saw something on the news that suggested this is what your candidate would do with homeless people, and I'm opposed to your viewpoint, instead of me saying, you're wrong. How can you think like that? Instead, help me understand your point of view. Okay, so I started on the dark side, but now we're going to get a little more lighthearted and talk about what we can do to cultivate connections. If you'd help me out, Jeff, and we have a poll. I'd like everyone in our viewing audience today to participate, because I want to find out who's here today, who joined us. Which of the following descriptions fits you best? If you could pick one or the other, I'd sure appreciate it. We'll give everybody a full minute at least. Okay, Jeff, thank you. I think we can all pretty much see the results. We definitely have more shy and or introverted people in our audience today. We do have those born with the gift of gab, and I would say I would be jealous of you. I was not born with the gift of gab. One of the inspirations for the work that I do, and especially my book, is that if I'd had the book, The Fine Art of Small Talk, when I was 15, maybe I would have made a friend. When I was 15, I was a dork, nerdy kind of person, loved math. And in addition to that, happened to weigh over 300 pounds. So as you can only imagine, not many people said hi to me because, and this still exists, you get ostracized when you're very overweight. You can take down the poll, Jeff. So I always was jealous of people that were born with this gift of gab. And I thought, what are they doing? What are they doing? Why do they have so many friends? And in those days, I thought, how are they getting dates? And I thought, can't somebody just tell me what to say, how to start friendships, how to build connections in business? What do I say when I walk into a hospitality suite? What do I say when I go to someone's home where I don't know them? And so that was the inspiration for my book, is I thought I needed that book. So now I'll write that book for other people. Not to say for all you people born with the gift of gab that you don't need some of these suggestions, and we'll get to that in a minute. So now that we've learned that most people in the audience are introverts or shy, I used to be shy. I'm no longer shy because I put myself out there. I'm still an introvert who behaves like an extrovert. And I think for all the introverts in the audience today, remember this. You don't have to go to the party, but if you do go to the party, I believe it's up to you to invest the energy to make the most of that opportunity and to connect with people. Lotus Network has a wonderful thing called the Connection Challenge, and they suggest, doing push-ups every day or eating vegetables every day. And I'm not going to do either one of those. Well, I might eat vegetables, but I'm going to make it a challenge to all of you today to make a connection once or twice a week. And so when I say make a connection, I mean with someone that you already know, but you haven't been very connected with, to pick up the phone and use the phone feature on your phone, or to reach out to get together face to face, or to connect with a stranger, someone you don't know, whether it be at church or synagogue, whether it be at some meetup, whether it be at back to school night. So the best way to launch a conversation is to use what I call our connection, our free information about our connection. How do you know the host or hostess? What got you involved in this charity? What's your secret ingredient to training for the Boulder Boulder? There we're standing next to each other. I don't know you. We're at the starting line. What's your number one ingredient for training for the Boulder Boulder? Have you ever done this before? The free information is, tell me about your kids when I'm at back to school night or on the soccer fields. But here's the key. It is up to us to take the risk to walk up to somebody new and engage them in conversation, or pick up the phone and become reacquainted. We can't hope others will always do this for us. So often, especially the extroverts in the audience, put out so much positive energy that people just come to them at meetings, at events. They sort of have this circle of friends around them all the time, or people that are interested in talking to them. So I say to all the extroverts, those born with the gift of gab, look around the room. When you go to a conversation salon for Lotus Network, don't wait till the meeting begins and the facilitator launches the program. Instead, sit down next to someone you don't know. Take the risk of starting a conversation with him or her or they. And it is a risk because they might reject us, right? So that's why a lot of us don't do it. You born with the gift of gab, you're probably not afraid to start a conversation. It's just that you don't have a minute because everybody's talking to you. So please look around the room, look for someone standing by themselves, look for someone at church or synagogue after services that is sort of lingering. Walk up to them, ask them, what brought you here today? I've never met you. Are you new? Have you been here before? Are you in the neighborhood? It's up to us to do that for other people. And then the real key to cultivating connections is to assume the burden of other people's comfort. That's what Steve did yesterday with this 9-year-old boy. He wanted this young man to feel comfortable about the fact that he was interacting with a stranger, that he disclosed that his father was gone, and that somebody was interested in this 9-year-old because Steve showed a genuine interest. That is up to us to assume the burden of doing that as well.